Hello?
Have you got the money?
Who's this, please?
Never mind. Have you got the money? For tomorrow?
For tomorrow?
Yeah. Have you got it?
I'm getting it, yeah.
You're watching Totally True Crime.
Totally true crime.
Stephanie Slater was born in 1966 in Great Barr in the West Midlands of England. She was a popular and warm woman. She spoke articulately and was often described as the life of the party. In the 1990s, she was an attractive, intelligent and engaging woman in her 20s, which made her perfect for her job. Stephanie was an estate agent. Long before the days of Rightmove and virtual home viewings, Stephanie was used to showing people around homes for sale, answering their questions, and ultimately trying to sell houses. She loved her job, and she was good at it. On Wednesday, the 22nd of January, 1992, 25-year-old Stephanie Slater went to work as usual. She worked at Shipways estate agents, and they're still running today. She had only worked there for 6 weeks, and she was still learning the ropes. She arrived at the office and saw her colleague Jane, and she noted that there were only 2 appointments in the diary. One was a home valuation, and the other was an unconfirmed viewing of an address they currently had on their books. The man said his name was Mr. Southall, and the home was in Turnberry Road. It was only 2 minutes away from the office, and Stephanie arrived a few minutes late. She wasn't sure that the man was going to be there because he hadn't confirmed the appointment, but when she arrived, she saw a man waiting there. Stephanie had done hundreds of viewings through her career and confidently took him into the house. They toured the bottom of the house first and then made their way upstairs. As she started to go back down the stairs, he pointed to the wall and said, "What's that?" She couldn't see anything, so she walked over to get a closer look. It was just a hook on the wall, but it was at that point this man lunged at her and started to attack Stephanie. He was holding a knife and a chisel. Stephanie fought back and managed to bend the chisel, which rendered it useless. But he held the knife to her throat, and at that point, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. She could see that with one more move, he could kill her. The man told Stephanie that if she screamed, he would slit her throat. Stephanie looked at him and told him that she wouldn't fight him anymore, and that she would comply with his demands. She said to him, "Please don't harm me. Remember, I am human." He seemed to calm down, and then he took her down the stairs. He tied a noose around her neck and asked her where her car keys were. He blindfolded her and then led her to the car and drove them both away. Stephanie was made to lay down in the car, and her kidnapper drove them 70 miles away. Meanwhile, Stephanie's colleagues were starting to get worried. She should have been back in the office ages ago. It had been over 2 hours since her viewing. Back in the car, they suddenly ground to a halt. The man then told Stephanie not to scream and said, "I don't know if you realise, but you have been kidnapped." Stephanie was not from a wealthy family, so she was confused. He then said, "I'm going to be holding you ransom. I want £175,000 from Shipways for your safe return." And then he pulled out a tape recorder and a ransom note, and he got her to read it out whilst he recorded it. He then went to a phone box and called her office. Her boss, Kevin Watts, answered the phone, and the kidnapper told him what had happened. He told him that he would receive a package from him in the post with instructions on it, and then he hung up the phone. Kevin called his boss and told him what had happened, and he instructed him to call the police straight away, even though the ransom recording had said not to. Uniformed police were deployed straight away, which of course was the worst thing that could have happened, because they didn't know if the kidnapper was watching. But luckily, he wasn't. He had driven to Newark in Nottinghamshire and to a tool yard behind a pub called the Swan and Salmon. This man's name was Michael Sams. At this point, Stephanie didn't know how dangerous he was. As they arrived at the tool yard, he took her out the back to his workshop and he asked her if she wanted a cup of tea and a ham sandwich. Stephanie was injured. She was bleeding and bruised, but he was offering to feed her. Meanwhile, the police started to search the property on Turnberry Road, looking for clues. They went to the upstairs bathroom and saw smears of blood. It was then that they called Stephanie's parents and told them that their daughter was missing. They were frantic, and the police were faced with an extremely difficult situation. They needed to find Stephanie, but they had no idea where this man had taken her, or even if she was still alive. Detective Superintendent Bob Taylor of the West Yorkshire Police Force was tasked with finding her, along with a team of officers. In the tool yard, Michael took Stephanie inside and tied her to a chair with a rope. He then started stroking her hair. He asked her to get undressed, and she refused. He then said to her, "But what about Susie Lamplugh?" If you haven't heard Susie's name before, she was an estate agent who went missing when she went to meet a man that she knew as Mr. Kipper, to show him a house. She's never been found since and is presumed murdered. Susie's case is infamous in the UK, especially amongst estate agents. Susie went missing in 1986, just 6 years prior, and Stephanie knew what he meant. Shortly afterwards, Michael raped Stephanie on a mattress in the workshop. During the assault, he bit her on her face and chest. Afterwards, he got up and told her that that wouldn't happen again, and that it wasn't much. Michael Sams had shown just how evil he really was. The police were desperate to find the package that Michael had told Stephanie's boss he had sent, so they went to the local sorting offices to try to find it. They located the package, and this recording was found alongside a letter.
This is Stephanie Slater. The time is 11:45. I can assure you I am okay and unharmed. Providing these instructions are carried out, I will be released on Friday the 31st of January.
The police now realised that the man had called into the estate agents previously, and they suspected that he'd planned this kidnapping. He'd chosen the house on Turnberry Road because it had a driveway down the side of the house that went back onto some fields. It was the perfect escape route. The press were now starting to gather, and they wanted to know what was going on. They had a feeling that there'd been a kidnapping, and the police had to bring them in on what was going on. They were asked not to print or report anything that might alert the kidnapper that they'd been called, and incredibly, but rightly so, the press agreed. They were promised interviews with Stephanie if she was discovered alive, and the full scoop once she was back and safe. The police decided that they would need to do a ransom drop, as per the letter, if they wanted to get any closer to finding out who this man was and where Stephanie was being held. They asked Kevin, Stephanie's boss, if he would do the ransom drop, and he said yes. The day before the drop was due, Michael called the estate agents. Kevin answered, and this time, Michael didn't disguise his voice. The police had recorded this phone call, and they thought they might be able to identify him through it. But something horrific was now happening to Stephanie. Michael had made her a makeshift coffin, and he told her that he would be keeping her in it. He had laid a wheelie bin on the floor, and inside he'd put a wooden box. He made her lay inside the box, and then attached electrodes to her legs. He told her that if she tried to move, they would electrocute her. He handcuffed her hands to the bar at the top of the bin and placed boulders on top. He locked the bin, so Stephanie was in complete darkness. Her back was twisted, and she had no access to food, water, or a bathroom. The police were studying the ransom note, and they made a horrifying discovery. 6 months before Stephanie was taken, there had been a murder. In July 1991, a sex worker called Julia Dart had been picked up by a man and taken to a warehouse where she was kept in a makeshift coffin. The man had made her write a letter to her boyfriend, which included a ransom for £140,000, and then once she'd done that, he killed her with a hammer. Julia had been just 18 years old. 9 days later, he dumped her body in a field in eastern Lincolnshire. The police noticed that the ransom notes were similar and that the same words had been mispelt on both letters. At the time, the police didn't know Julia had been kept in a makeshift coffin, but it was enough to frighten the police. The chances of getting Stephanie back alive were getting slimmer. They were waiting for the next call, and they knew that they were at the mercy of the kidnapper. 5 days later, Stephanie's parents' phone rang. The police were on standby to record the call, and her father Warren was instructed to answer. But it wasn't the kidnapper's voice that he heard. It was Stephanie's. It was another recording, but one that proved that she was still alive.
Hello, it's Stephanie here.
They have allowed me to send a message to you, just to let you know I am all right and unharmed. I hear that West Bromwich Albion lost yesterday to Swansea, 3-2. I want you to know I love you. I am not to say too much, but whatever the outcome, I'll always love you. Look after the cats for me.
The previous day's football results proved that she was still alive, and this gave everyone great hope. Kevin Watts, Stephanie's boss, was gearing up for the ransom drop, but it was nothing compared to what Stephanie was still going through. She was being held in a box within a bin. She was let out for food and drink, but then made to go back inside. At this point, she'd been held captive for 7 days. Then Michael Sams called her boss Kevin again.
Hello?
Have you got the money?
Who's this, please?
Never mind. Have you got the money? For tomorrow?
For tomorrow.
Yeah. Have you got it?
I'm getting it, yeah.
The ransom drop was to go ahead the next day. Whilst Stephanie was held captive, Michael had customers coming into his tool shop. His wife would even bring him lunch there, whilst Stephanie was encased in darkness in her makeshift coffin. She had no idea how close anyone was to her, so she never called out for help. 8 days after Stephanie Slater had gone missing, her boss Kevin was instructed to go to Glossop train station. He'd been told to go to the phone kiosk and wait for a call. When he was there, he was told to go to another telephone in the Sheffield area, and he did as he was told. There was a lot of fog that night, which made him slightly late. He was told to go into a lane in the middle of nowhere, and this made him extremely vulnerable. He then saw some instructions telling him to put the money in a different bag and then to put it on a wooden tray, which was seated on a wall. The other side of that wall, there was a 60-foot drop. Kevin realised that he was on a bridge. Once he walked away, Michael got his money. The tray was attached to a fishing line, and he pulled the money down. He got on a moped and rode off. The police were fuming. The money was gone, and their suspect had outsmarted them, and there was no sign of Stephanie Slater. Stephanie had been in the box on her own from 8 a.m. that morning until Michael returned between 10:30 and 11:30 p.m. He unlocked the box and told her that he had the money and that he would now drive her home. Michael Sams dropped Stephanie outside of her front door. Stephanie was almost immediately thrust into the spotlight. She was doing the media interviews the police had promised the press as part of their deal for silence during her ordeal. The woman had spent over a week in a makeshift coffin. She'd been sexually assaulted and violently attacked, and now she was being made to give interviews to journalists when really she should have been receiving the best possible treatment to aid her recovery. Not only that, but she was also working alongside the police to try to identify her kidnapper. 3 weeks after she was released, BBC's Crime Watch did an appeal in an attempt to find her kidnapper.
In a few minutes, you'll hear the voice of the man who kidnapped Stephanie Slater.
Do you want her to give you a password? If you tell me a word, I'll get her to repeat it to say that she's all right.
Yes. Could I have her mother and father's Christian names, please?
A lady called Susan Oak contacted the police and said that she recognised the voice. She believed it was that of her ex-husband. His name was Michael Sams. The police realised that a lot of the information she had about him matched the information that Stephanie had, and they decided to pay him a visit. They drove to his house, and his current wife, Tina, opened the door. She said Michael wasn't home from work, but that they had watched Crime Watch the night before, and Michael had warned her that the police might pay them a visit because he thought he looked and sounded like the E-Fit pictures that they'd had on the show. They then drove 10 minutes to the yard where Michael worked, and they found him there straight away. Upon entering the yard, they knew they were in the right place. Stephanie had told the officers that she had listened out for every little noise to try to determine where she was. She'd heard the ping of a microwave, the dial of an old-fashioned telephone, metal shutters going up and down, and the sound of a cash register. All were present in Sam's tool yard. But they needn't have worried, because Michael, almost immediately, confessed to kidnapping Stephanie Slater.
A 50-year-old local man was arrested in Newark, Nottingham, and is being held in connection with the kidnapping of Stephanie Slater. He is expected to be charged in the near future.
Michael Sam's background showed the police that he had first dabbled in crimes in his mid-30s when he stole a car and made a fraudulent insurance claim. He was given a prison sentence, and whilst he was incarcerated, he was diagnosed with cancer, and that had led to the amputation of one of his legs. When he got out of prison, he lost his job, and after that, those who knew him said he was a completely different person. He was charged with the murder of 18-year-old Julie Dart, the kidnap and imprisonment of Stephanie Slater, and another crime that he had committed, defrauding British Rail. Something else that had helped confirm that Michael was the person who had committed these kidnappings was his dyslexia. On the ransom notes, the same words were misspelt. At his trial, Michael Sams admitted to kidnapping Stephanie Slater, but he denied having anything to do with the murder of Julie Dart. The jury disagreed, and he was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years for both crimes. He was 51 when he was sentenced. 3 days after he was convicted, he asked Detective Inspector Rob Taylor to visit him in the prison. They went into a room with a suitcase which was secretly recording. It was then that he confessed to killing Julie Dart. He said he was doing so because he wanted to give her grieving mother the truth about how her daughter had died. Julie and Stephanie were two innocent women who fell victim to evil. Michael Sams' motivation has never been completely clear, but he did tell the police that he had 2 personalities, and Stephanie said he often mentioned another man who was in on the kidnap plot with him, that he was a nasty piece of work and she should be thankful that he wasn't there. This turned out to be his other personality, but the police cited that he was an intelligent man and there was no further record to suggest he was of diminished responsibility when he kidnapped Stephanie. But Michael Sams didn't keep free from reoffending. He attacked a female prison guard with a metal spike in 1995 when he was an inmate at Wakefield Prison. He was convicted of her assault and an extra 8 years was added onto his sentence. He received £4,000 after his artificial leg was lost during a prison transfer, and this had the public up in arms, as many people were furious that he received so much money in compensation.
I just think that people like that should be locked up forever, and I'm going to do my utmost to make sure when 2017 comes along, I will be knocking on the Home Secretary's door just reminding him of what this man has done and that he should never be released.
Stephanie Slater was diagnosed with cancer and passed away at the age of 50 on the 1st of September 2017. In a heartbreaking interview, her best friend Stacey Kettner said that she had turned into a recluse after her horrific ordeal. She would scrub herself raw in the shower multiple times a day because she never felt clean. She couldn't have a wheelie bin because she was traumatised by being kept in one for 8 days. In an interview before her death, Stephanie said, quote, "The horror never goes away. I've rebuilt my life to a certain extent, but there are still bits of me that I've lost. You go on Facebook and you look at your friends. You see they've moved on and had children. I'm still here. I'm still on my own. I'm still single. I do feel quite cheated." Stephanie Slater showed a type of courage that only few could possess in such a horrendous situation. It was shattering to hear the effects that Michael Sams' evil actions had through the rest of her life. And we must remember Julie Dart, who never got the chance to live an adult life because Michael Sams stole it so callously. In April 2023, Michael Sams was denied parole. He's now 83 years old and one of the oldest prisoners in the UK. Thank you for watching. If you found this video interesting, please subscribe for weekly videos like these. You've been watching Totally True Crime.